get to stand up and tell the insurance companies and the drug companies that their day is gone, that health care is a human right.
Health care is not just a human right, it should be an American right. And I believe the best way to get there is Medicare for all.
But while Democrats portray a system that our system is in meltdown mode, a new study finds that 90% of Americans are already covered. Here to weigh in is Fox News medical contributor Dr. Nicole Saphier. Hey, Dr. Saphier.
Hi, good morning, Ainsley.
So they want to overhaul. Is that really the problem when you hear the statistics? 90% of Americans are covered.
Well, again, I agree with everything that they say. Americans should have access to health care. That doesn't necessarily equate to a single payer plan. Of the 9% of people that are not insured, half of them are choosing not to be insured. And so the reason is because people can't afford it. So instead of focusing on the 4 to 5% of people who don't have coverage right now, why don't we focus on the 95% of people who can't afford their coverage, right? So when you listen to Bernie Sanders and everyone else talking about their Medicare for all plans, really they're just speaking, they're touting this to a small microcosm of the United States, because 27% of adults do not want a complete overhaul by the government of their health insurance, especially those who have employer-based plans. People do not want to get rid of their private systems. So what they need to do is focus on lowering costs. That will increase access to care. And, you know, it's really upsetting to me when I have them saying that people are dying if we don't go to Medicare for all. But no, President Trump said at the very beginning of his term, healthcare is complicated, right? He's actually starting to get the hang of things. He is doing a lot of things behind the scenes when everyone's focused on some of these other headlines. What is he doing? There's an out-of-network legislation going through right now. He's working on Medicare negotiability. He's working on bringing generics to the markets, price competition, immigration control, and lowest unemployment rate. This is how we're going to get people covered by health insurance and affordability. He still has a ways to go, but he's already putting those pieces together.
All right. Dr. Saphier, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now to a Fox News alert. 3 people killed in a shooting at a popular food festival in California as the hunt now ramps up for a potential second suspect who's on the run. We are live on the ground next.
A day of fun and food turned into an afternoon of panic and bloodshed. Thousands of people were attending this food festival here in Gilroy, many including kids. They were out there when a gunman opened fire. Witnesses say he stopped to reload and then he fired again into the crowd. And in fact, some witnesses say they heard as many as 50 shots. People took cover under music stages and hid behind food tents. Others ran for their lives. Witnesses say the shooter, described as a tall young man wearing camouflage, appeared calm as he fired at random. The police chief says the gunman and a possible accomplice managed to get around the security screeners and metal detectors at the entrance by breaking through a perimeter fence.
They used some sort of a tool to cut through the fence to be able to gain access through the secure fence line, and that's how they got into the festival area itself.
Gilroy police are always a heavy presence at this annual event, and they were near the gunman when he opened fire. The chief says officers engaged the gunman in less than a minute and fatally shot him. Law enforcement from multiple agencies are now following up in reports of that second suspect. They're searching with helicopters and canine units, but that person's role is unclear and there's been no description. Police will only describe the weapon used as some kind of rifle. Meantime, while some of the injured have been treated and released, some of the more seriously wounded have had to undergo surgery. Their conditions are not known. Of course, the big question here this morning is why? Why did this gunman open fire on a crowd of innocent people, including many, many kids who were just out enjoying a lovely Sunday afternoon? Police have not yet discussed any possible motive, but we do hope to learn more at the next police briefing in just a few hours.
Claudia, didn't someone hear the shooter say, "I'm doing this because I'm angry"?
There has been that report by one of the musicians that were playing when this shooting happened. This musician telling the Associated Press that he heard somebody shout out, "Why are you opening fire? Why are you shooting?" And that the gunman replied, "Because I'm angry." We have not had that confirmed yet by police, but clearly that appears to be one of the accounts that we're hearing, is that something set this gunman off, and he was just determined to cause a lot of damage and carnage.
And Claudia, we don't know the nature of this person they're looking for, what his or her role might have been.
Police have not been specific about this reported second suspect. They say it's unclear if this second person may have been an additional shooter or provided some kind of a support role, and nor, as I just mentioned, have they provided any kind of a description. So the search for this second person is still ongoing, which is why you see the crime tape still up, and no one is being allowed to go back to the festival venue, for instance, to get their cars. A lot of vendors and a lot of festival goers were basically stranded here because they couldn't get back to their cars. So this remains an active and very fluid investigation while that search continues.
Tragic story. As more things develop, we will bring them to you. Claudia Cowan, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Claudia.
I don't know what you guys did this weekend, but we had a few conversations this weekend about Baltimore. There seems to be a few that's ongoing there.
Yeah, for folks that were at the beach, fill us in. What happened over the weekend?
Ultimately, we saw what Elijah Cummings at multiple committee hearings, first with Bob Mueller in those hearings, but also with Kevin McAleenan, mischaracterizing treatment of folks at the border, saying that kids are sitting in their feces, really going after the Trump administration. And in response to that, President Trump had some things to say about Elijah Cummings' own backyard.
That's right. He tweeted out, why is Elijah Cummings has been a brutal bully, shouting and screaming at the men and women of the Border Patrol about conditions at the southern border, when Baltimore, he says, the president tweeted on Saturday, is far worse and more dangerous. His district is considered the worst in the USA. And then the president was called a racist for this attack. And we're going to talk a little more about that. But just 14 minutes ago, the president is up and tweeting already. And he just tweeted this out. Baltimore, under the leadership of Elijah Cummings, has the worst crime statistics in the nation. 25 years of all talk, no action. So tired of listening to the same old bull. Next, Reverend Al will show up to complain and protest. Apparently, he is en route to Baltimore later today. Nothing will get done for the people in need. Sad.
Yeah, he basically said, if you're going to go down to the border and be critical, look at your own backyard. You need to fix what's happening there. Elijah Cummings replied on Saturday by saying this: Mr. President, I go home to my district daily. Each morning I wake up and I go and I fight for my neighbors. It is my constitutional duty to conduct oversight of the executive branch, but it is my moral duty to fight for my constituents.
The president this morning pointing out the predictable cycles. So here goes Al Sharpton headed to the scene to agitate on what he will deem to be racial issues, whereas the president is pointing out it's Democrats and liberal policies over the decades.
Right.
The federal funding that's been squandered in Baltimore, ultimately not making the lives of those citizens better. Does it really make it better to go agitate? That's the question the president's asking.
Well, I think the message is resonating with some of the residents, at least there. Listen to what this one lady had to say. She lives in Baltimore.
He has never done anything for not even one person that I know of. I never heard anybody say anything about him. And people want to talk about Donald Trump this, Donald Trump that. Why is this man over there taking care of people at the border? We hungry. We need a place to stay. And it's just sad. He worried more about them than his own people. It breaks my heart to see this.
Steve, we covered it this morning, and she went on, or this weekend, she went on to talk about how all the focus on the border, all the focus on illegal immigration, and what are we doing for those folks? What about the forgotten men and women in these areas of West Baltimore who've been left behind by liberal policies? What about us?
That breaks my heart. She said it breaks my heart. Imagine growing up in an area where it's so dangerous and there's so much violence and there are drugs being sold on the street. I mean, those are little kids that grow up in an area like that. Why are we spending so much money to take care of people who are not citizens, giving them sanctuary in California, paying for their insurance, when we need to use that money to go clean up the cities that are violent here in America?
I was talking to Fox News correspondent Peter Doocy, who covered the riots down in Baltimore back in 2014, 2015. And he reminded me that the security made sure that the only way he could be reporting from the street was for him to be wearing a flak jacket. They also specified at one point when he was out about to do a live report, the security team moved him off the street to a secure location because there was somebody with a Molotov cocktail riding a bike down the street.
This is in Baltimore?
This was in Baltimore. at the height of the riots. Mick Mulvaney, who said that this was, initially this was the president counterpunching back at Elijah Cummings, blasts Congress for focusing on things like the Mueller investigation and not on the problems of that once great city of Baltimore.
I was in Congress for 6 years. If I had poverty in my district like they have in Baltimore, if I had crime in my district like they have in Chicago, if I had homelessness in my district like they have in San Francisco, and I spent all of my time in Washington, D.C. chasing down this Mueller investigation, this bizarre impeachment crusade, I'd get fired. And I think the president is right to raise that. It has absolutely zero to do with race.
Of course, they make it all about race. One of the guys we had earlier on the program, Dan Bongino, framed it so well, because you'll know Dan from this program. You may not have known he ran for the Senate in Maryland because he was passionate about the conditions in Baltimore and the great people of Baltimore who are suffering under the policy of Democrats. Listen.
Liberals have destroyed and decimated these cities. They have been a forest fire. You know, Pete, in the 1950s, Baltimore was one of the wealthiest cities in America. It has been driven into the ground by monopolistic liberal control. The government did this to people. There is nothing wrong with the citizens of Baltimore. These are people looking for safety and prosperity. And thank God the president brought the heat to these Democrat politicians who have destroyed those cities. When is the accountability going to start? It better start now. Don't dare run away from this argument. Anyone. It's long overdue.
There are a lot of problems in Baltimore. And, the president has been pointing this out, and he has been roundly labeled by many on Twitter and on the mainstream media as his comments being racist. But then you look at some of the things that other people have said in the past, and you wonder, well, was that racist?
Yeah, I wonder if Bernie Sanders will be asked about this statement he made in December of 2015. They got debates coming up. They got an opportunity to ask questions. He said this about Baltimore.
Anyone who took the walk that we took around this neighborhood would not think you're in a wealthy nation. You would think that you were in a third world country. What we're talking about is a community in which half of the people don't have jobs. We're talking about a community in which there are hundreds of buildings that are uninhabitable.
Gosh,
what are you saying?
These politicians in Washington, my gosh, do they do anything? I mean, it's been, when they talk about immigration, the president's had to use executive orders, emergency funding to get something done to fix the immigration problem. When it comes to Baltimore, I mean, he has an opportunity to really clean up that city and look out for his constituents. What are they doing?
Here's the decision point. Okay, so we can agree on problem identification. If Bernie Sanders said that now, and President Trump said, clearly there's an issue there. The question is, how do you solve it? Democrats, as Dan Bongino pointed out, have controlled that city.
That's what they need to be focusing on.
70 years, but it's always been more money squandered by local politicians, as opposed to economic opportunity zones, which this administration has worked hard on. Devastated places to bring them back to life. Charter schools, vouchers, giving people educational opportunity, to cracking down with real solid policing, community policing that's aggressive to make sure that those folks deserve safety just as much as anybody else.
So from what we've seen with the president's tweets, it does sound as if Al Sharpton is going to be heading to Baltimore. So I would look for this story to continue at least another day. In the meantime, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib was on CNN yesterday. And when she was asked, I believe, by Jake Tapper,
she's an economist, right?
About the economy and how it's doing really well in her home state of Michigan, she said, look, this has nothing to do with Donald Trump. It has to do with the people, because the people are demanding that the economy go up. And so by them demanding it, it's working. Listen.
Their wages are going up because the people are demanding it go up, not because Donald Trump wanted them to go up. Does that make sense? Because the movement of Fight for 15 is growing. The movement to hold the corporations accountable is growing. And it's because of movement work, not because of who is president of the United States.
But the economy is doing better in Michigan under President Trump.
But I don't put President Trump as the reason. It's because of the people demanding it.
No, it's because the manufacturing jobs that the president brought back, he continued to allow the coal industry to thrive here. Remember, Hillary Clinton wanted to eradicate it, and the coal miners pushed a picture of his family in front of her and said, you do away with the coal industry, this is the family that's going to be affected.
When you have to ask, does that make sense? It probably doesn't make sense. And the basic economic principle at play here is if you've got a lot of opportunities, if there are not enough workers and a lot of jobs because businesses are expanding, what's the one thing businesses do? They raise wages. Because you've got to entice people to come work for you.
It's supply and demand.
It's supply and demand. It doesn't happen magically. You can't just demand pay me more. Well, they want to have a federal minimum wage, which could have really bad impacts in a lot of places where people cut jobs. But that's just a basic lack of understanding and a total unwillingness to give credit where credit is due. They will never give them credit.
What do you think about that? Email us, friends@foxnews.com. Also, as is every day, we're on Facebook.
That's right. All right, Carly has some headlines for us. Hey, Carly.
Hey, good morning, guys. And we begin here with a Fox News alert. Iran releasing brand new video of its military confronting a British oil tanker.
British Navy warship Foster 236. This is Safani warship. Motor tanker British Heritage is under my control. You are ordered, do not interfere in my operation.
That radio conversation from the tense takeover earlier this month, Iran's Revolutionary Guard boarding the British ship in the Strait of Hormuz. Officials have called this reciprocal after the British Navy seized an Iranian tanker weeks earlier. A major security scare for the royal family. A convicted torturer reportedly comes within feet of William and Kate's children. The Sun reports Darren Benjamin was delivering furniture at Kensington Palace 2 weeks ago. Now, he got past security and walked right by Prince George, Prince Louis, and Princess Charlotte. The Sun also says Benjamin bragged about how close he got. A palace official told the paper they are reviewing their security plans. The 9/11 first responders bill will become law today. President Trump expected to sign it surrounded by hundreds of people directly impacted by the 2001 terror attacks. The law will extend funding for families and victims and emergency workers with 9/11 related illnesses. Check this out. A Cleveland Indians pitcher gives up 4 runs and then decides to show off his arm power.
What he did before he came out, watch this, he turns and fires it. Thankfully, he threw it against the board, so there was nobody in the seats there to get hit with it. But you don't do that when your manager's coming out. It's disrespectful.
You can't be doing that. Trevor Bauer throwing the ball all the way over the center field wall before being yanked from the game. He apologized. The Indians lost 6-9 to the Royals. Those are your headlines. There's no tantrums in baseball. Come on.
He was just showing off. That's all.
That's right.
Well, thank you.
Look how far I can throw that.
Exactly.
It is impressive.
A little too late.
If only had done that over the plate in the previous inning. Thank you, Kansas City Royals, for beating the Cleveland Indians. I'm wearing my Minnesota Twins tie today.
Nice.
We're in first place in the AL Central. I heard you could just demand things and they happen. I demand we make it to the World Series. According to Rashida Tlaib, that's
From
all
your
you
lips
need.
to God's ears.
There you go.
All right.
All right, well, 15 minutes after the top of the hour, Democrats ramping up their calls for impeachment, even after Bob Mueller's testimony on Capitol Hill.
My personal view is that he richly deserves impeachment. He has done many impeachable offenses. He's violated the law 6 ways from Sundays.
But our next guest is a Democratic congressman who says it is time to give up the impeachment talk. Representative Josh Gottheimer is coming up next.
Good to see you.
Hi, nice to see you.
Aren't giving up their push for impeachment. But do all members of their party feel the same way? Let's ask one of them. Democratic Congressman and Blue Dog Coalition member Josh Gottheimer co-chairs the House Problem Solvers Caucus, and he joins us now. Representative, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So over 100 of your colleagues in the House, despite what happened at the hearings and Bob Mueller's performance, now say they want impeachment. What do you say to that?
Listen, everyone's got a different perspective on this. What I think we need is actually continued very strong oversight. And, the Speaker has made it pretty clear that what we need to continue to do is ensure our separation of power, continue, and whether across the board in all our committees, using the courts, using our oversight powers, make sure that we can get the information we need. And I think we need to continue down that path.
But does that mean you think that Bob Mueller's $40 million and, as the president calls them, 19 angry Democrats and all these agents were not able to sufficiently investigate what happened and we need more of it?
Well, I haven't read the full report because we haven't. What I did was hear from what I heard from Mueller was what a lot of people heard. There's some questions that are raised, especially, by the way, one issue that doesn't get enough attention is Russia and the issues from the election and making sure that we continue that strong.
Wait, Russia doesn't get enough attention?
the issue in terms of, well, I'm not talking about on your show. I'm just talking about what in terms of investigating what happened in the election, making sure that we continue those investigations. By the way, that's completely bipartisan. You hear Democrats and Republicans ensuring we get to the bottom of that. And there's legislation in the Senate now that we need to actually keep moving along to ensure that there's no interference in our elections. But what I think we need to continue to do is strong oversight, make sure we're able to get the facts that we need. And also at the same time, and I've talked to you this before, it's very important that we also, when I talk about back home, is focus on other issues. And today there's a good one in terms of the Victims' Compensation Fund, the president signing into law, standing by our first responders and our firefighters, making sure that we continue to I'm going to keep trying to fight to reinstate SALT, the state and local tax deduction, to get taxes down. We got to make sure that we have to be able to walk and chew gum.
But Representative, every moment you spend in a committee, and you know this better than I do, investigating or overseeing is another minute you don't spend on these issues you talk so much about. So you and Nancy Pelosi have so far not called for impeachment, but over 100 of your colleagues have. Has your party gone too far? Are the American people sick of the obsession with this investigation?
I think what the American people want us to do is continue our job on the oversight, continue to make sure we get to the bottom of the facts, and then at the same time, as you point out rightly, continue to focus on other issues, right? Fixing our infrastructure. I mean, I drove in from Jersey today. It's like playing Frogger on the potholes, right? You got to deal with the infrastructure issues. We've got to make sure we get our taxes down and fully reinstating SALT, a very big issue for us in Jersey.
But you're talking about these issues.
By the way, you can do both. I guess my point is
but are you
both.
concerned that the perception of the public is House Democrats and Democrats writ large obsessed with Bob Mueller and the Russia investigation and totally distracted from any conversation of substance about what they're actually for?
No, I mean, I think if you watch your show, you guys are obsessed. I got it.
I'm obsessed with a lot of things.
But I'll tell you what. I don't think it's like. I don't think that's the perception. I think the perception I'm home is you got to make sure that you're able to do your job, which is oversight. We have a constitutional responsibility to get to the bottom of the facts, to get more information, keep looking for more information. But we also have to make sure we do the other part. Get healthcare costs down, do the other issues that matter to folks. And I think you actually can do both quite well.
We will find out. Representative, thank you very much for
your time.
Good to see you. We can agree on the roads. Let's do something about that.
We're going to fix those.
All right. Well, up next, a devastating story. A father overwhelmed in court, charged in the deaths of his 1-year-old twins after leaving them in a hot car.
In Brazil, you can see the images right there. It lasted less than 3 minutes. Police say a gang of armed men disguised themselves as federal agents and targeted a cargo terminal. At least one person is under arrest. Next 10 feet, that's the size of that alligator right there that was chasing swimmers near the Gulf of Mexico, north of Tampa, Florida. A trapper caught the beast and thinks it weighs about 300 pounds. Nobody was hurt, thankfully. And finally, $3 million. That's how much that 16-year-old young man won by playing a video game. Kyle Giersdorf of Pennsylvania winning the first ever Fortnite World Cup. He plays the game 8 to 10 hours a day, but paid off for him $3 million. Unbelievable. All right, Hazel.
There were some kids that came to our show that were out on the plaza last week. They were going to that. All right. Thank you so much, Steve. It's 29 minutes after the top of the hour. This is such a heartbreaking story. If you read about it over the weekend, a father is charged in the death of his 1-year-old twins after they were left in a hot car for hours in New York. The attorney for Juan Rodriguez says that he's inconsolable and he is beside himself. He pleaded not guilty. Child hot car deaths continue to be a tragic problem in our country, with 23 deaths so far this year. To help prevent these tragedies, the director of kidsandcars.org, Amber Rollins, is here with some potentially life-saving tips. Good morning to you, Amber.
Good morning.
So in your experience, how long have you worked for this organization, Amber?
I've been working with Kids and Cars for 15 years.
15 years. There are 23 deaths this year alone. And you're familiar with many of these cases, you were telling me earlier. What usually is the reason for this?
Well, in almost every single case, we see a change in the morning routine, some type of change. It doesn't have to be anything big. It could be a switch in the daycare drop-off routine or a detour on the road even. Parents running late. And, on top of that, we've got parents who are extremely sleep deprived and fatigued. Especially with twins.
Right.
And, that really affects the way that your memory systems in your brain function.
In any of these cases, in your experience, was it ever intentional?
I do not know of a single case where somebody intentionally left their children in the car to let them die from heat stroke.
So are they normally charged? Do they have to serve time?
So in about 50% of these cases, the parent or caregiver is charged, and not always convicted. Sometimes the charges are dropped. Sometimes they take a plea deal. You know, most of them don't have it in them to fight charges after something so horrific happening.
What are some tips to make sure this doesn't happen to our kids?
So we want to encourage parents to look before you lock. And what that means is open the back door of your car and check the back seat every single time you leave your vehicle. And one thing that you can do to help yourself get in the habit of doing that is to put something that you need to start your day. And that item's different for everybody. For me, it would be my work laptop. It could be your cell phone. It could be your key card to get into your work. You know, something that you would have to go back to the car, to get if you got to your destination and didn't have it. And then, go ahead.
I know that.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I know that one of your tips is announce who's getting in the car. What do you mean by that?
So a lot of times these tragedies happen when there's a miscommunication between two parents or two adults. And so you want to literally verbally announce who is getting each child out of the vehicle. And then you also want to do that look before you lock and check once everybody's out to make sure.
Got it. Now, what about the schools? Is there a way you can work out something with your child's school or daycare to say, hey, if my child isn't at school, please check on the child before 3 o'clock, check immediately. Where is the student?
Yeah, absolutely. If your child goes to any type of child care facility, home daycare, if you take them to grandma to watch them, during the day, you want to make a policy with that person that they would call you immediately if your child didn't show up as planned.
Right. Tell us about your organization and how did you get involved?
So we're a national nonprofit organization, and our focus is protecting children and saving lives in and around vehicles. And I got involved as a social work student 15 years ago when I was in college. And when I learned about all the preventable tragedies that the organization was working on and that nobody else was working on them at the time, my heart was in it, and I've been there ever since.
Do some folks that you work with, do they have similar stories? Is that why they got involved with the organization?
Most of the people that we work with have lost a child or had a child that was very seriously injured. And, they have dedicated their lives and their passion to making sure that no other family has to go through something so terrible.
It's everyone's worst nightmare. The Hot Cars Act, it calls for technology that would prevent children and animals from dying in hot cars. How far has that passed? Do we have that in motion now?
So the Hot Cars Act was introduced this summer on both the House and the Senate side, and it's passed the Senate committee and has not moved anywhere in the House right now. But we've been educating and raising awareness about this issue for 20 years, and awareness is at an all-time high, and yet the number of children dying is also at an all-time high.
This is a bipartisan issue. Absolutely. I hope that the House ends up moving on this. Thank you so much, Amber, for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The battle over Baltimore.
First you saw Ainsley.
That was your real shot of the morning.
Right.
At your shot of the
I am the shot of the morning.
There you go. That's a new proud American, Texas Rangers star, Elvis Andrus. Andrews.
Well, he has a better story than I do.
Officially sworn in as a U.S. citizen over the weekend, the shortstop who was born in Venezuela shared the moment on Instagram, writing, "I'm thankful and grateful for the rights and freedoms of Americans and will never take that for granted."
That is awesome. Andrews says that he really learned to love the Constitution and our nation's history while studying for the citizenship test. He's looking forward to voting in the next election. Congratulations.
Indeed.
Super cool.
Yeah. Okay, 38 minutes after the top of the hour, a Twitter war over the weekend between President Trump and Congressman Elijah Cummings.
The congressman has been vocal about condemning conditions at the southern border last week during a House Oversight Committee. In response, the president wrote, quote, "As proven last week during a congressional tour, the border is clean, efficient, and well run, just very crowded. Cummings District is a disgusting rat and rodent infested mess. If he spent more time in Baltimore, maybe he could help clean up this very dangerous and filthy place."
Well, the president immediately getting predictable backlash, but our next guest says When you look at the evidence, he is right.
Fox News radio host and author of the upcoming book, Culture Jihad, How to Stop the Left from Killing a Nation, Todd Starnes joins us. Hey, Todd.
Hey, good morning, guys.
Good morning. All right, so you're going to break down some of the facts about what's happening in Baltimore.
Yes, that's right. And this happens all the time. The Democrats, they just hate President Trump so much, infected with Trump derangement syndrome, that they intentionally lie about what the president is tweeting. And in reality, and I broke this all down in my column over at foxnews.com, point by point, the president was absolutely right. Let's start with rat and rodent infested. Absolutely. According to Orkin, the pest control people, Baltimore, one of the top 10 most rat-infested cities in America. By the way, all the rest of those cities on the list controlled by Democrats. You talk about the economy, talking about safety. We go down the list. Even Bernie Sanders, of all people, called Baltimore the conditions there looks like a third world country. So we're talking about even Democrats who understand what's going on.
But the rat problem was so big down there. Wasn't there a documentary that came out about the rat problem?
That's right. They actually, Steve, you're absolutely right. And they literally took people through the neighborhoods. And when you actually talk to the folks who live in these neighborhoods, these are people who put their trust in the Democrats to fix their communities, their neighborhoods, and the Democrats betrayed these voters. And that's why I wrote in my column that I feel sympathy for these people, because they have been promised something from the Democrats, and the Democrats not only did not deliver, they turned that city and many other cities around the country into dystopian scenes. It's just absolutely outrageous.
And on this show, we've heard some of the voices of those citizens who said, "Where's Elijah Cummings been? I haven't seen the influence on my life." But speaking on voices of people speaking out, there was a fallen officers memorial in South Carolina. This story floored me when I first saw it. It's Tega Cay. The city had decided to scratch out the word Lord because one resident complained. You can see it right there. They literally scratched out the name of the Lord in the memorial, but that's going to change.
Yes, that's right. Thankfully, because of all the viewers of Fox and Friends, the listeners of my radio show, they fired up the phones over at City Hall, and city leaders have decided to go back and replace the word Lord. Look, let's be honest here. That memorial was desecrated by city leaders. And I write about this in Culture Jihad. There is a war to eradicate American culture, and it starts with the war on religious liberty, Pete. And we've got to take a stand. And that's why I'm so excited about what's happening in Tega Cay, is that the people took a stand. And when they took a stand, the city leaders backed down.
But they didn't put they're not going to restore the entire Bible verse, just that part of it, right?
That's right, just that part of it. So, Steve, that's why I called in my column for the ouster of every single lawmaker in Tega Cay who voted to remove the Bible verse and the word Lord from that plaque. We've got to start taking a stand, and we've got to start fighting back, and that's how you can do it. We can be happy warriors, as I say in the book.
When we heard about this story. I'm from South Carolina.
South Carolina.
I'm like, what? That's the Bible Belt. Everyone goes to church on Sunday. I'm glad that they came to their senses and changed it.
Yeah, I am too. And again, the only reason they did it, and look, let's be honest here, the only reason they did it is because people got outraged and they called City Hall and they demanded they do something.
Yep.
Good. The people were heard.
Yes.
Todd, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks.
All right. It is now 17 minutes before the top of the hour, and Carly joins us today, and she's got the news.
That's right. And good morning, guys. Let's get straight to it. A deadly weekend of bloody violence claims at least 9 lives in Chicago. Another 27 people left injured in several shootings since Friday. Among the dead, a 3-year-old boy killed by a gunshot wound to the face. Police are now working to investigate whether or not that shooting was an accident. At least 281 people have been shot and killed in Chicago this year alone. The FBI is on the hunt for a criminal they call the Pink Lady Bandit. Officials say she's wanted for robbing 4 banks along the East Coast in just 8 days. Now, she got the nickname from a pink handbag she's carried during at least 2 of those incidents. There's now a $10,000